Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. Your host, a behavioral scientist and bachelor, talks to leading experts and successful singles about living solo and living well. Travel more, make things, sleep in when you want to. Here's the playbook for the person who is unapologetically unattached. Now, please welcome Dr. Peter McGraw.
Welcome back. This week's episode features a remarkable solo and cast member of Dragon's Den, the Canadian version of Shark Tank. Arlene Dickinson joins us to talk about reinvention and single living. One brief announcement before we begin. I've moved solo to a bi-weekly schedule in order to give myself a little extra time to plan a reboot. That's right. I'm going to make some improvements to the podcast. In the meantime, please go to petermcgraw.org/solo to join our Slack channel and let me know how I should improve the podcast. New versions are coming after the new year. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let's get started. Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is Arlene Dickinson. Arlene is the general partner of District Ventures Capital, a venture capital fund focused on helping market, fund, and grow entrepreneurs and their companies in the food and health space. She's a 3-time best-selling author, and you may know her from her role as a dragon/venture capitalist for over 12 seasons on the television series Dragon's Den. Think Shark Tank for Canada. As further evidence that she is living a remarkable life, she has served for many years as an honorary captain in the Royal Canadian Navy. Welcome, Arlene.
Hi, Peter and Darlene. It's so nice to see you both.
It's a pleasure. We are joined by a special co-host today, Darlene, with a D, Savoy. Darlene is a solo podcast listener originally from the East Coast of Canada and has returned to live there after living in various other cities for over 20 years. She is a self-described late bloomer, which is always dear to my heart, and she is in the midst of yet another reinvention, and she aspires to create solo-friendly co-housing developments. Welcome, Darlene.
Thank you.
So Darlene was kind enough to introduce me to Arlene, and we are here to talk about reinvention, to talk about solo living, and then talk about the opportunities that solos have for reinvention. I think we should start with your most recent book, Arlene, which is not surprisingly titled Reinvention. The subtitle is Changing Your Life, Your Career, and Your Future. And in that book, you use your own process for turning around underperforming companies and apply it more broadly. Is that a fair summary?
I use the idea of strategy that's being applied to businesses of all sizes and shapes and forms that are going through strategic reinventions to, it's not so much underperforming as it is, could be a pivot. It could be, a shift in leadership. It could be many things that are happening.
I see. And
using the same strategies that we applied there as a consultant in the marketing space to businesses that we work with, to thinking about how I could use that for my own business and in fact, for myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you've had your own amazing professional and personal reinvention. I think we need to start with the flood, don't we?
Yeah, that's probably the best place to start. The thing about reinvention is most people wait for something catastrophic or something that has happened in their life to really reevaluate themselves. So, whether it's a divorce, whether it's and which might be timely for this, this audience to think about, or whether it's a death or a loss of a job or a career change or whatever it is, we usually wait for these things to happen where we kind of go, wait a minute, I can reassess my life here. And for me, that moment in time that was really a catastrophe was literally a natural catastrophe that had happened in southern Alberta, which is where my head office was for my marketing company, Venture Park. And at the time, it still continues to be the worst natural disaster in the history of Canada. And the water kind of flooded right by my office and took out my office with water, and we had to move all our people to remote locations. And And when my office shut down and when the flood hit my office, it was an absolute nightmare because back then, even 8 years ago, technology wasn't what it was today, what it is today. And so you couldn't, people weren't on Zoom calls. There was no accessibility. There was no real ability for people to work remotely. And we are in a very creative industry. We're marketers and we require a lot of collaboration. And so I had people all over the city in different offices. And we were trying to pitch these businesses that were our existing businesses. And I had people quitting, I had people leaving. I had the office underwater. And of course, we didn't win any of the business. So it was a mess. That's kind of painting the picture of what was happening after 30 years in business, or not quite 30 years, but close to 30 years in business, and looking at it and going, how does this even happen? And I'm not prepared for it. I don't know what to do with this. So it was exactly that moment that created the need to reinvent.
And what was happening with you, Darlene, at this time?
Yeah, I was about to say, when I was reading your book, Arlene, I could so relate to your state of denial leading up to that, because I was right down by the Stampede grounds. I was in a tower there on the 24th floor, and I woke up the next day and went, oh, they were serious. There really could be a flood all the way up here.
Were you in a
Yes,
Oh, yeah, I was there too.
Were you in the same building? No
Mhm.
way. That's hilarious.
That's
Small
so
room.
cool.
Exactly. And you thought there's no way this is going to happen. It's like, we're right here. How could this be? And then it did, right?
It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. We have a video going, and Arlene's smiling right now, and Darlene's smiling right now. But there weren't smiles at this time. This is a true tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So talk us through the kind of like days and weeks and months that followed that as your business faltered, and how did you go about starting to make these changes?
Well, as in any time in life where we're faced with, something that is either tragic or different and difficult for us, I was really struck by what to do. What do you do now? How do you manage this? And the business was in disarray, but I was busy doing so many other things, Peter and Darlene. I had many business interests by then. This business was kind of self-running. It was, had a management team in place. I wasn't doing the day-to-day. And so I literally went home and kind of thought about it. And my first instinct was, I should probably just shut the business down because it just felt like too hard to try and rebuild it. And I went and back saw my banker, and he said, shut it down. What are you doing? Like, this isn't where you shut this down. You don't need this business, and it's just going to drain capital. And so I went home, and I was very depressed because I had all these people working for me. I had clients who relied on me. I had, if I shut it down, I was impacting many, many lives. And I just felt absolutely horrible. And, literally went to bed and pulled the covers over my head. If I'm being very frank, it was just one of those, I didn't know what to do. I knew financially what to do, but emotionally I didn't know what to do. And it was so hard. And then, I just started thinking about it, thinking it just kind of came as over time. I kept thinking about this team and what I could do in this business that had been in business for 30 years and the legacy of that business and how I wanted it to carry on. And so between the tears and the fear and then I will add something because I think this is an important point. I'm a public person, and so failure of any kind of failure is very public. So it doesn't matter that this business wasn't my core living anymore. It was the business people attached to me and understood me for. Mm-hmm. And so if it shut down, that was not going to be good.
Did this business make you? Is this like the thing that kind of catapulted you into these other opportunities?
Absolutely. This was my first foray into entrepreneurialism and building a business and growing and learning and I felt an obligation. I'm a big believer in you dance with the one that brung you. Mm-hmm. And that business had brung me to where I was. And so it was really difficult, but then I started to just think about it and put pieces together and think, what is it about this business that I care about? And I realized that what I cared about was helping entrepreneurs and my team. and started to use the strategy that I had deployed with all of my clients and myself. Shoemaker's son, right? We never do the work ourselves, but I decided I needed to, and that's what we turned around and did.
I want to preview something later. So you said you went home, you pulled the covers over your head. This was an emotional time. At that time, who was at home? Who were those people?
At that time, I was seeing somebody, but I wasn't, I was home by myself.
Okay. Because we'll get to that in a little while, because I wasn't sure the exact timing.
Yeah, and that makes it even harder because, again, I want to liken it to a divorce because I've been through two of them. You go through this, you're alone, you feel very lonely. And whether there's people around or not, these are lonely choices. These are lonely decisions. When you're running your own business, it actually doesn't matter how many people are around you. These are decisions that weigh on you, especially as an entrepreneur. It's an incredible burden, which is why, that whole "it's lonely at the top" is incredibly true. So, yeah, while I wasn't I had lots of people around me, but I was alone.
Yeah, and also the choice sits with you. You get the credit or not, if you decide to rebuild this business or to shutter it.
Right.
So let's talk through, right? You decided to start cobbling together your own shoes, right? Rather than making them for other people, as you were saying earlier. What are those kind of first steps? So I want to start to give people this kind of broad understanding. This is a time where people are thinking about reinventing themselves, I think.
Right.
Coming out of this pandemic, they're recognizing that there are other possibilities, opportunities, things that they want to do. They realize life is short and so on. And so I'm curious, what are those starting points in order to do this? And did you follow it as you talk about in the book?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, probably for me, it was more intuitive because I'd been practicing the process for years. So I didn't have to sit down and literally, kind of do it exactly as I outlined in the book, but it is exactly what happened. So, there's really 4 steps to reinvention that anybody can go through, and coming out of whether it's a personal reinvention or a professional one. So it's hard, heavy lifting work that is not always easy to do and can be very, especially when it's personal, because you have to really take a hard look at your life and yourself. And so that's step 1. It's really 4 C's. So we'll start with 4 C's. So the first step is really counterintuitive. When you want to reinvent yourself, your first instinct is to think about what you want to do and where you want to be and where you're headed. But the counterintuitive part is actually this is the place where you have to be retrospective and you have to go backwards. And you have to spend some time thinking about who you are, what you've done in your life that you're most proud of, the things that have happened to you that you hold dear to yourself, the values that you've had, the people that have helped you along the way, the things that you go, yes, when I was doing that, I was the happiest. At the same time you're doing that, you're thinking about all the things that you did that were wrong. You're thinking about all the challenges of the people that you met. You're thinking about the things that you don't like about yourself. And so this is hard work. And taking a hard look at ourselves is something people don't want to do. Businesses are used to kind of doing it. People aren't. People, we don't want to look in the rearview mirror. We're trained to look forward. We're trained to think about what's next, not what's now, but not what's been. And so it is, as I said, it's counterintuitive, but that's the first step. The first step is to think about what's good, what you love about yourself, what you loved about what you did, the things that you're proud of, and bring that stuff forward with you. You don't want to get rid of everything in the past. You often hear about people, I got rid of it. I got rid of my husband, and I got rid of my weight, and I got rid of my house, and I got rid of...
I burned it to the ground.
Exactly. I burned his clothes. I did all these things. And that's okay, but you can't leave everything behind. And I think what happens is when you see people who have really good relationships after they split up, generally that's because they could hold on to what was good about the relationship. They didn't just wipe it all out. So step 1 is counterintuitive. Step 2 is to think about your core purpose. So what's your why? We talk a lot about your passion. Like, what's your passion in life? Do what you're passionate about. I like to think about your core purpose. What gets you out of bed every day? Why do you get out of bed every day? What is it that you are trying to do with your life that is going to, give meaning to it? And so finding your why also takes some thinking and focus. But once you have your why, you can start to see the things that you were doing that really weren't contributing to your why. You can start to see that you're on maybe you're on those gerbil wheels, or you're a hamster wheel. You're going around, but you're busy, but you're not doing things that are actually contributing to your why. Yeah. And so you think about your core purpose.
Can I ask about this process? So number one is looking back and assessing, strengths, weaknesses, kind of thing. What you're proud of? What are your mistakes? This next part about your why, your core. Do you suggest people journal? Like, is there any sort of technique that kind of helps with this? Should they be going out on walks in nature? They're weak in the woods. Is there some process associated with answering these questions you would suggest?
For sure. I mean, because we're talking about personal reinvention here, on the first step in terms of looking backwards, it's found in pictures, it's found in letters, it's found in cards, it's found in music, it's found listening to, and thinking about the people that you met. It's found in conversation. It's found in memories. And so it is literally going back through, like in our day, it was scrapbooks, but, going back through your phone and thinking and seeing the stuff that you go, yeah, I remember I was really happy in that picture. Why was I happy in that picture? What was going on in my life then? In terms of your why, listen, this is, again, looking at what's fulfilling you and saying, what is it that I want to do with this one life I have? And this is a very personal journey. There's really no exercise other than contemplating whether what you're doing is actually fulfilling the purpose you feel you have in life. And if you don't feel you have purpose, if you're thinking about it, you go, I don't really know what my why is, that's okay too. I think you just have to, at that point, spend some time understanding what your values are, and what you won't do is as important as what you will do, right? And that starts absolutely to help you narrow it down. The third C is to think about your currency. And, when I say that, people always say, money? No, I don't mean money. I mean, what it is that you're good at. And we're all good at something. Every single one of us has a skill or a talent or something, and I often use the example of Mrs. Fields, who, made cookies, like some person, there's people who make great sandwiches. There's people who do whatever they do, we're all good at something. And is that something that you do? Is that something that's helping drive your core purpose? Is it something that is reflective of what you're proud of in your life? And this is, again, I've talked to too many people who say, I'm not good at anything. And it's so discouraging, because you are good at something. And if I have any message for the listeners, you are good at something. You absolutely are. And the way to find that you're good at something is to stop comparing yourself to somebody else. There might be 1,000 people that are good at making cookies. There might be 10 million people that are good at making cookies, but you might make the best cookie, and you might create Mrs. Fields cookies as a result of that. So, it's probably a corny example, but it's one that's on the top of my head right now.
Hey, solo listeners. You know Julie Nervelli from her frequent appearances on the podcast. Well, her latest entrepreneurial venture, Bachelor Girl Productions, is now a sponsor. Bachelor Girl makes fun, flirty t-shirts that serve as an icebreaker when you are out and about. Let the world be your dating app with messages such as "Spoon size matters" or "All flirts welcome." You can also wear your Bachelor Girl t-shirt on an actual dating app picture. I recommend the message "Swipe right" for that purpose. Just go to bachelorgirlproductions.com and use discount code SOLO for 20% off your order. That's SOLO in all caps at bachelorgirlproductions.com. Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Bachelor Girl.
And the final C is context. So once you understand kind of your past and your what you like about yourself and what you have done well, and you think about your why, and you think about what you're good at, then you can turn your attention to what's going on in the world. And can I take who I am and what I care about and what I'm good at, and can I apply it in the context of today's world? And the answer is always going to be yes. We can say, I'm older, so what do I know? The things I have are old-fashioned, and people don't need that today. But of course they do. They they need your skill, they need your talent, and you just need to think about how you can make what you do relevant in the context of today's world. So those are the 4 steps that are outlined in the book. It is a little bit of heavy lifting. I'm not going to lie. This is not work you do on a weekend while you're out for a stroll. This is pay attention to your life work. This is heavy lifting of your life. And so it requires time, it requires attention, and it requires thought.
And how did you then do this with your own? So you have this flood, you're getting advice, shut it down, Arlene. Right, it makes good financial decisions, but you have this team, you have this legacy, and you decide, no, I'm not going to do that. How did you create this reinvention for this company?
I gathered my team around me that was left, the team I had left, who were really the most loyal people in the world. And we just started talking about, what was possible. And we talked about what we liked about the business and what we didn't like about the business. We started to draw out on whiteboards kind of all of these different paths that we are on and all the things. And I will tell this to anybody, the good thing I think when you're going through this process is writing it down does help. To your point on, I don't think you have to journal, but it does help to draw diagrams. You'd be surprised what you start drawing a few things on a scrap of paper. And when you do that, what we found as we were doing it is there was this central idea of entrepreneurialism that we'd focused on, but we hadn't really focused on. And we started to take all of the things about my life, because I was so tied to the business, my brand personality on the marketplace, my time on the show and what that meant for entrepreneurs, the things I stood for in the marketplace, the things Venture did in terms of helping entrepreneurs, the things we had a website at the time that was aimed at entrepreneurs. And we put all that on a piece of paper. And I say it now, and it's obvious that it was all linked through that, but it wasn't obvious at the time. We were running all of these different things. I was off doing my stuff for my brand. The company was doing its marketing thing. The website was doing its thing. Everybody was off building their thing, but we didn't connect it all. And so with my team, we were able to find that connection. And when that happened, and I started thinking about it, I started thinking about what it was that I loved about the show and what my why was more and more and more. And I realized that Canada, and I know this is an American podcast, but it applies anywhere.
We're big in Canada, Arlene.
Oh, are you? Okay, I thought you were. Okay, so Canada, all right, perfect. That Canada had this huge, I'd seen on the show over and over and over again, all these entrepreneurs pitching food ideas and health ideas. And, and they'd come on and they'd be told, oh, you're never going to, you're never going to make it. The big companies like Procter & Gamble and Unilever are going to squash you. And it just kind of hit me that here we are as a nation with incredible natural resources and commodities. And we ship them everywhere in the world for other people to turn them into products so that we can in turn buy them back. And that last mile of innovation and added value is where all the money is. It's where all the margin is. And so I started thinking about, people should care more about their health, and we should care more about the food we're eating. And it was at this time of my life I was caring more about my health and the food I was eating, because as I was going through this reinvention, I was overweight, I was under a lot of stress, I was not taking care of myself, I was so focused on fixing the business, I was personally broken.
I see.
And all of these things were going through my head about what we could do, and I realized I needed to focus on myself or I was going to not be here for the future. And I'd never in my life not worked out. I'd never in my life not taken care of myself. But I went through 3 years of, I probably gained 30 pounds, maybe more. I was just a mess. It was because I was so stressed. And thinking about food and health and its relevancy to what it meant to me, and I knew to other entrepreneurs, to people in general, thinking about Canada's skills and natural resources and thinking about all that, I decided to go and raise a fund to invest in the space and to build this brand new ecosystem that had never been done before. So all of this stuff, it sounds like, well, you just got up and decided it. No, these are things that evolve. As you start putting pieces in place, you see a picture much more clearly. And I started to see that there was no one in Canada that was investing in these spaces, yet in terms of employment in Canada, food and health, agriculture and health, 2 and 3, like, like this is the most, we have so much skill in these areas. And so I thought, all right, we've got the skill, we've got the resources, we've got the commodities, we've got all these things. I'm just going to invest some money in a fund that could do this. And then I couldn't find a fund that was investing in it. And I thought, well, maybe I should start the fund. And then I'd never run a fund before, but I'd done a lot of investing. And so I decided to start a fund. And then I thought, well, if I start a fund, where are these companies going to go to get scale? Like, how are they going to grow? They're early stage companies. I thought, maybe I need to start an accelerator to help these companies along the way. And so I opened an accelerator, a not-for-profit accelerator. I started to raise a fund, which, oh my gosh, that was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I raised a fund, a $100 million fund, opened the accelerator. Since then, we've created a marketing firm attached directly to the fund, because I knew that what makes consumer goods brands big? Marketing.
That's right.
So took all my marketing expertise, took the fund, took the accelerator, got a commercial kitchen attached to it, and got a media company attached to it. And now we have one of the most unique ecosystems in North America that focuses on putting capital to work, but actually provides resources to these entrepreneurs through the accelerator programming, through the kitchen, commercial kitchen, through what we do with the media company, and through marketing. And that, all of that, this ecosystem that last year alone probably put close to $300 million in revenue into the Canadian economy, employed thousands of people as a result of this idea that came from a company that was literally underwater to 5 years later has helped over 100 companies, created thousands of jobs, and every year those companies are driving hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And it started with, I don't know what to do, and me pulling the covers over my head. So I'm testament to the fact that this hard work is worth it, but I'm also testament to the fact that it can be very difficult for you and harmful to you if you don't pay attention to yourself.
Amazing. Very inspirational story. I read your book. It was great. And, having gone through a few hiccups, I can relate to the divorce one. I can relate to the flood one, although the stakes were very different in our situation. I didn't own property or a business. But it's true. I feel like as we get older, I become more conscious about these reinventions, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I feel like, I don't know. I don't think I could have read this book when I was 20 and went, oh, there we go.
Yeah,
that's how we do reinvention.
That's right.
Yeah, you kind of have to live through some of it yourself and then learn from it.
Yeah, well, it's too bad that we, as humans, wait until something bad happens to us for us to think about who we want to be with our lives, right? And I'm only grateful that it happened to me before it was too late. I got a chance to reinvent myself, as do we all have a chance to reinvent ourselves. It's not about, and when I say too late, I don't mean about my age. I mean still alive.
Yes, indeed. So, Arlene, you were talking about Mrs. Fields earlier, and I think, as you described, I'm a business school professor by trade, so I talk about the need for good product, but then also the need for good promotion. And what happens sometimes is there's someone who is good at making pies, or good at making cookies, or good at making smoothies, or whatever, or good at personal training, or whatever this thing may be, but they're not a business person.
Right.
And so I just want to compliment you on the brilliance of building an ecosystem that not only gives these folks capital in order to develop and scale, but then also supports that development and helps them with the scale, because they may be good at this one thing, but they may not be good at all those other things.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I actually think that's the future of venture capital and private equity. I think venture capital for too long has focused on the financial inputs that they give to companies, and they might have some people that they bring in to support their businesses that they invest in. But, these ecosystems that can be constructed, I believe, are the future. Mm-hmm. I operate 5 very different businesses, 2 marketing companies, a kitchen, an accelerator, a fund, a media company. So there's, I guess, 6. And those companies, while they're different, they all have, and not only are they different in terms of what they do to day, the actual, delivery of what they do, they're also different in terms of their financial reward for what they do. Yes. Because 2 of those organizations are not-for-profits. And what they have, though, in common is a common purpose, Each one of them gets out of bed every day to help a consumer goods company in the food and health space succeed. They all do it differently, but that's what they do. And so they share a common purpose. They have a different business model. They run different types of businesses, but they get out of bed every day to do the same thing.
Yes.
And so I think this is what an ecosystem needs to be. It needs to allow for different business models, common purpose, and different reward in terms of how people are compensated.
So let's talk about this, because not everybody who's listening is interested in a professional reinvention. Right. I think a lot of folks are interested in a personal one. But I think this idea of having an ecosystem matters too for a personal reinvention. So I'll kick it off if I can, but I'm curious your reaction to this. One of the things that I often talk about, and you've already alluded to it, is how people, especially singles, need a team. A group of personal and personal friends and family connections, and then also professionals to help support them in living their remarkable life. And it strikes me to be the case if you're going to make a personal change, a reinvention, that you're going to need to create that ecosystem for yourself also. And I'm curious your reaction to that idea. Have you given this some thought? What's your reaction to that notion?
I think it depends on the person you are. And, as you said it, I thought I'm an introvert, and there are people who don't have, big groups of people around them who they can rely on or they can talk to. And so I don't want anybody listening to think that they have to have an ecosystem of friends, because not everybody has an ecosystem of friends. Maybe you do need to develop that. But I talk a lot in my book about a notion of frenemies. Mm-hmm. Your friends can actually be equally as bad for you as they can be good for you. The people who say, well, why would you want to do that? Oh, you don't want to do that. That's not what you're good at. You should do this. Those aren't friends. Those are frenemies. Mm-hmm. They push you down by telling you shouldn't or you can't. So I think you have to be careful who you surround yourself with. But your point is also true in that it's helpful to have somebody to talk to, for sure. It's helpful to have resources and a team around you that will support you. I think the point I'm trying to make is that team might be completely a new team to you. It may not be your existing friends, okay, because you may find that those existing friends are the reason you are where you are.
Yeah, look, if someone's an addict, one of the best ways to stop smoking or stop drinking or stop whatever is you have to get rid of friends who smoke, who drink, who do those whatevers. And so the recreation might end up happening on the team side of things.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm. Or hiring therapists. That's always...
Therapists are good.
Indeed. So let's talk a little bit about your own personal experience in your development as a solo, Arlene. You were married young. Mm-hmm. Can you take us through your sort of evolution? There's a reason you're on this podcast beyond the fact that you are great at reinvention. You, dare I say, have become an advocate for single living.
I have, and I actually started not a podcast, but a video series on the single life, which I need to do another one. Just to remind me, I haven't done one for quite a while. I need to do another one.
By the way, you just lit up on the screen as you talk about that. I just want to say.
I had so much good feedback on it. It's just been busyness. I just haven't had a chance to, but I will do one. I married at 19, 4 kids by the time I was 27, divorced at 30. So that was my first marriage. Mm-hmm. Went right into another relationship, not right away. Went from that relationship, and all my relationships were fairly long term. And then went from that into another relationship. Got married again and divorced after 7 years. And then 7 years later, and then I got engaged to somebody after that. So I would say from the time I was 19 to the time I was in my 50s in relationships.
We call this the relationship escalator. You were
exactly.
riding the relationship escalator in some way, shape, or form for much of your adult life, it sounds like.
Well, at my generation when I was young, you were told if you weren't married by a young age, there was probably something wrong with you, and that you were supposed to get married and, be a good wife. And I tried. I miserably failed at it. But let me take that back. I don't know that I failed at it. Sometimes we've just chosen the wrong partners. And that's okay too. It can't always be that, there's something wrong with me. maybe there was something wrong with them, and maybe there was something wrong with both of us
That's
together.
right. Yeah. The connection is not right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And so then when I found myself, and then after when I was engaged for several years, and then I broke that off, and that would have been in my 50s at the time. I actually can't, I'm really bad with time. I'm really, really bad with time.
I'm figuring that out.
This has been true for me for my whole life. I have no concept of time. It drives everybody crazy because I'll say, I just talked to you. And they'll say, that was like 6 weeks ago. And I'll go, no, it just happened like my whole life. So
Right.
it's not new to me because of my age. It's just who I am. But I think I want to say it's been about 8 years or so since I've been single now. And at first even though it was my choice, I didn't know what to do. I thought I had to get in another relationship, like I just needed to go and date somebody, and did a little bit of that. And then I realized, no, that's not what I need or want. And then because of my age, because I'm a female, because I'm a fairly successful female, it's very hard to date, it becomes more and more challenging. And so I found myself kind of thinking about, well, what is it I want out of a relationship? And I realized that, and maybe this is, just me, but I found myself becoming increasingly more happy once I let myself be okay with being alone.
Mm-hmm.
I was wanting to be in a relationship for everybody else, not for me. I was really quite happy. And, and I focused on my health, and I focused on my family, and I focused on my, my fund and everything else. And now I say to people, I'm 98% whole. And would I give up any percent of that 98% to try and make it 100% and find somebody that didn't make it work and take me down back to 80% or 70%? No, I wouldn't do it. Mm-hmm. So I've just kind of reconciled that I have such an amazing life, and I've been given such amazing opportunities, and I feel so lucky. And how wrong is it to feel like somehow I'm less than or not good enough because I don't have a partner? Like, it's just such a ridiculous thought. So that took me a long time to get there, though.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
How so?
Yeah, it just, if you don't know another way.
Yeah.
And it sounds silly to say that I wasn't aware of another way, but yeah, in our generation, it's kind of, that was the way. And where I'm from, the East Coast,
Yeah.
small town, it's just, that's what you do.
Yeah,
and I got married when we were together in high school, sweethearts, married at 25, divorced at 30. So very similar in that respect. And I can relate to that. And then just, looking, seeking, and then realizing, what am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute. Yeah. Speaking of asking the why, I had to ask myself, well, why am I looking? Mm-hmm. And I realized, it's for this, this, and this. Well, I can find these other things elsewhere. I don't need to be in a partnership, the traditional partnership, to find those things and to make me happy. Yeah.
What's interesting about that, Darlene, is, and I bet you get this all the time because you're beautiful. You're truly
Aww.
very beautiful. And what I hate most is when people say, you'll find somebody, or you'll be happy if you just, why don't you just, go and.
Why are you single, Arlene?
Why are you single? And you're so good looking, and you're this and that, and you kind of go, what on earth has that got to do with anything? And
it's the wrong question.
Yeah, and when people say you'll find somebody, I go, like, what? Is there like a yard sale somewhere that I go and like look through the stuff that's on the desk, and there's a guy there, that's the one I want, I'll take him. It's just so ridiculous. But people, in their well-meaningness, can be very unhelpful.
Yes, I agree.
I think there's a commonality that I find. I don't have the same experience because I've never married, but there seems to be two commonalities that I think both of you have identified. I have it myself, and I think a lot of the listeners can identify it. One is you start to realize that there's a lot of pressure from others about how you should behave. And Arlene, you said it's well-meaning, and I do believe it is well-meaning. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an unfortunate pressure because it knocks people off a course that's right for them.
Yeah.
And the second realization is a personal one, which is a realization that you like your life. You enjoy your life. You're happy with your life as is. And that removes some of the pressure to find someone else to make it better, and to also recognize the risks of that other person. They may make it better, but unfortunately they may also make it worse. So for the listeners who recognize the pressure, who realize that there's a lot of good in their life, it may even be a great life, or dare I say, a remarkable life. But how do you kind of take that next step and sort of transform yourself, as I would say, from being a single to being a solo, from viewing yourself as incomplete to viewing yourself as complete? Do they need to do those walks in the woods? And do you need to go through that same kind of 4Cs process, do you think, Arlene, for that reinvention?
I mean, I would certainly encourage everybody to go through the process. The book is pretty self-explanatory, and it's not complex. It's more hard work emotionally. Mm-hmm. But, I think if you feel like you're satisfied with your life, but still feel the societal pressures, the one thing you have to ask yourself, back to your earlier point, is, are you hanging around the right people? If people don't want to invite you over for dinner because they insist on having an even number of people at the table, or they, gosh forbid, that they have Darlene there because she's really good looking, and maybe
some husband will be tempted.
Going to give you a big head, Arlene. Oh my God.
Yeah, all of these things, you need to ask yourself if you're hanging out with people that are actually going to encourage your life versus trying to persuade you to be more like them. And so this is this notion of equality, this notion of normalcy, being, married and kids, is got to go away. You've got equality has to stay. The normalcy of saying this is what a perfect woman is. She's got a man or a partner of any sort, whether you're LGBTQ2 or whatever however you identify. A partnership isn't going to change who you are and your happiness. And so you have to be prepared to say, I'm happy. You have to start there. I'm happy. And you're still going to have moments of loneliness. You're still going to have moments where you wish you could share a moment with somebody and you're sharing it on your own. And then at some point it becomes, I'm okay sitting at a restaurant by myself and having a really great dinner and a great glass of wine and not being with somebody. And people think that's weird. And I just think I just feel like I've got such great self-awareness about myself that way. I'm quite happy doing it. So why shouldn't I do it? Because other people think I shouldn't? No.
By the way, when you're at that restaurant eating alone and enjoying that, you should look around at the other couples there. There are a lot of bored couples sitting in silence, eating their meals. It's not always as delightful as you might imagine.
Oh no, I know that. I have observed them, and I often think I am so, because I've been in those. I've been on those at those tables for 40 years of my life, and I've been more lonely lying in bed next to somebody I didn't love than I've ever been lying in bed alone, ever. And there's a big difference between lonely and alone. Yes. And I think this is something that you also have to come to grips with.
So you said you do this series, these videos. Is there one of them that really stands out to you as that you're very proud that you shared that with the world?
I have to say that those videos are what brought me to bring you to Peter, because I'd always been following you just as far as the Dragon's Den or whatnot, but I didn't realize that you were an advocate for solo. And then I saw one of the videos. I was like, oh,
which one, Darlene? What
I
stood out
can't
to
remember.
you?
I just remember it was the perfect rant. The perfect solo rant.
Yeah, I've ranted a few times. I've had such great feedback. I mean, I think honestly, the comments I've had well over 1,000 comments on, people it's actually crazy, the feedback I've had, where people just said, oh, there's somebody who's actually saying, I think I can't remember the gal's name, the actress who just went out, and the one that was on, anyway, one of them who just came out and said, I'm not wearing a bra anymore. I don't care. It's uncomfortable. I hate it. I'm not doing it anymore. And everybody the whole internet blew up and said, oh my gosh, somebody finally said it. And somebody who's got a profile is talking about this. And I think for me, it was that I had enough of a profile that I was prepared to stand up and say, I'm fine being single. I'm happy. So I think, there isn't one that stands out. I've really enjoyed doing all of them, and honestly, I do them at the last spur of the moment. I'll just sit there and go, that really bothered me, or this is happening and why did that happen, then I'll just talk about whatever that is.
Well, I'll put them in the show notes so people can get a feel for what they are. Darlene, is there one in general that has stood out for you, or you just enjoy the general emotion?
The general, she hit all the nails on the head, people asking me why I'm single, people asking me who I'm seeing now, all the annoyances that one experiences. She was bringing them up and just ranting. It's cathartic, to listen to.
Yeah, no, I'm seeing this time and time again in terms of people, they react because there's a lack of counter, right? There's so much pressure. There's so much conversation about coupling up, about riding the relationship escalator. And that if you give people any sort of alternative to it and you tell them it's okay to feel the way you do, it's okay to not want this, they go, oh, thank you. Like I had a previous guest who said, I feel seen when I listen to this podcast.
I was going to say, I just went back and looked at the series, and the one that I landed on that I thought, oh, this is one. I did one called Why Am I Single and Why Does Everyone Else Have the Answer?
Now there you go again.
Yeah, I'm single because I choose to be, but everyone else has to tell me it's because I'm too intimidating. I'm not looking enough. I'm too this, I'm too that. And it's not the answer. The answer is because I choose to be. Mm-hmm. And that was just one of them. I also did one on, do you sleep on one side of the bed or do you sleep all over the bed? And I did one about cooking for one and what that means and how you manage to cook for one, and why are single men treated differently than single women are. Why is it okay to be a single man when you're older and you're seen as a catch, but a single woman seen as like a spinster and not desirable? Like, it's just crazy.
It is. This is something that comes up a lot, and I've noticed a lot is the differences with regard to gender and the challenges with it, where I think some of the challenges for men are on the young side, the sort of incels of the world, and then for older women, especially the stereotyping and the prejudice.
If you're an older woman and you date a younger man, it's a taboo, and if you're an older man dating a younger woman, you're lucky.
Yes, that's right.
It's ridiculous.
So one of the themes that I talk about with solo living is, what economists call optionality. Right, that you have, because you are often more mobile, you might be less tethered, and so on, you have more freedom in some ways. You may also have a different set of challenges, but I'm wondering if we could kind of, as we start to bring this to a close, is to talk about that, right? So if you're reinventing yourself as a married person versus you're reinventing yourself as a solo person, what are the differences there? I often think that we find ourselves as solos living by the rules of married people and not even recognizing how much we have that we can deviate from a 9-to-5, how we can take risks and start businesses, how we could become digital nomads. Do you have any thoughts about the solos who are listening to this as they contemplate reinvention, or either around opportunity or how they may want to think differently than their partnered counterparts?
What do you think, Darlene? I'd love to hear your thoughts first. You're just going through this, so.
Yeah, well, I have to say, having been married and in relationships, and then it's funny. Right now I'm going through a strange reinvention where I moved back to the East Coast right before the pandemic hit. And if it were 10 years ago, I would look at my life now and say, oh my goodness, you're going backwards. But again, going back to the don't compare yourself to others syndrome. I realize now, no, it's actually progress. It's just I need to be here now. I'm in my parents' home right now, and I've been here the entire pandemic, but I couldn't have done this 10 years ago, right? Certainly, when I was trying to couple, there was certain check marks. You have to be in a couple. You have to be, in a house. You have to be buying whatever it is the checklist is. But now I feel like I have it's just a more open set of check marks. It's just a completely open, and it's for the goal that I have in my mind. But some of the steps may seem like I'm going backwards if I were using my old checklist.
I see.
So so it's a different set of success criteria.
It doesn't involve a house and a white picket fence and so on.
So my solo checklist is very different. My path is very different. My criteria for success is very different. because I can open it up, I guess.
Yeah, there's more available to you. I mean, to the point on optionality, I think everything's available to you. If you decide you want to go back and be a couple again, go back and be a couple again. If you decide you want to stay single forever, stay single forever. If you decide you want to, switch sides and, do that, like do whatever. This is the thing I think we all miss in life. This is the point. This is the most poignant point we can make about life, that it is your life. And the optionality is yours. You get to decide what you need. Nobody else. Don't ever give up that choice. Don't ever give up your agency to somebody else to determine what happiness looks like for you. And I think, so optionality, you bet. You got lots of options. You got every option you want, as long as it's the one that's going to make you the most happy.
So, Arlene, when I was prepping for this, Darlene and I had a conversation, and I was like, what kind of dragon is Arlene? Is she like one of the cutthroat ones, or is she one of the supportive ones? And Darlene said, well, she's a businesswoman and she's good at what she does. And so she's sharp, but she's one of the more supportive ones. Mm-hmm. And I think what you just said and the way you just said it encapsulate those two sides of your life. As someone who has been tremendously successful in the world of business, but then is also someone who cares about other people and cares about herself. And I am thrilled that you're contributing your voice and your energy to making Canada better, but also to making the lives of single people better. And so I hope you keep making your rants. Mm-hmm. And I hope you keep lending your voice and your experience to this dialogue, because you're doing incredibly important work for folks to license them to recognize other people don't know what's right for me. Yeah. And this solo path for now or forever is the right path for me. And I want to thank you for doing that generally. And I want to thank you specifically for joining us on this podcast and doing that. Mm.
Well, thanks, Peter and Darlene. It was absolutely my pleasure. This is a topic I do care deeply about. I mean, we can't change the world unless we give each other the opportunity to be okay with who we are and not try and tell people how to live their lives. So I appreciate the podcast and what you're doing and how you're encouraging people to be single if they want to be.
If they want to be.
And encourage, and just, single, solo, labels need to go away. I think whatever it is you want to be, just be that and be the. One day you're going to look back. My mom told me that she turned 90 yesterday, and she made a comment about, getting old is it's not worth the pain for what you get. And so I think we've got to remember that old age is coming at all of us. Yeah. And we want to make sure that we have lived our life, not somebody else's. Mm-hmm.
Indeed. And I also wanted to give a special thanks to Darlene. So Darlene is a listener turned participant of Solo. And one of the things that I believe is going to be important for this is to build a community and to build connections among like-minded people. As you were saying, Arlene, you might need to cull some friends. And I want to provide a place to add some new friends, some people who are going to invite you over, whether you're going to bring a date or not, or no matter how good you look or not. and so I want to thank Darlene for being just a really valued member of the Solo community and for contributing and helping make this podcast better.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I mean, yeah, what a special day to meet you, Arlene.
Really lovely to meet you too, Darlene. And good luck with whatever your path is. Good luck with it.
Thank you.
And I love the idea of co-housing for people who want to still have somebody around but don't want to be in a relationship. So good luck with that. It's a great idea.
And so just a little preview. I'm actually later today taping an episode on the Golden Girls.
Oh,
so that will be forthcoming. So
I'm older than the oldest Golden Girl was on the show, I think, at this point. I mean, it just, again, shows you how TV is. We thought they were 100 years old. They weren't that old.
That's right. Yes. Well, very good. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much, guys.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. For more about our guests and show notes, go to petermcgraw.org. Please subscribe and share with your single friends.